Have you ever wanted something just so terribly badly? Yes, you have. I know a story of a child who was in middle school age child who wanted a laptop for Christmas and asked their parents for a laptop for Christmas really, really badly, thought that it was time for them to have their own personal foldable computing device. And so they asked for a laptop. And their parents said, "You are not getting a laptop." And they said, "Okay, I've heard that before. And so, the days are getting, I want a laptop. You're not getting a laptop. Okay, I'm not getting a laptop. And then, Christmas is coming along and, there's some presents showing up for this present. Only a few though, because one of them is a medium-sized rectangular box. I want a laptop. You are not getting a laptop. That is not a laptop. Oh, okay. And Christmas rolls around, and they grab the box, and they tear the wrapping paper off and open it up, and it is a screen. It is a TV. It is a small to medium-sized flat-screen TV for their room. And this child opened this up and burst into tears. They had just wanted so badly and had set their sights so badly on this thing that they wanted that even then they ended up getting a gift that was pretty cool for them. They were just like, the desire was such a powerful thing, the want, and then the crash of that desire not coming to pass. It was just too much. It was just like this incredible pain that even though they were like, oh my gosh, I actually did end up getting a good present, a good gift, I'm actually having trouble receiving it and enjoying it because the pain of this desire being unfulfilled is just so overwhelming for me in this moment. I wonder if you've ever experienced desire in that way. Not just desire that is strong and burning and you want this thing and then the pain and the challenge of that not getting unfulfilled, but it actually making it difficult for you to receive some other good thing because your desire was burning so hot for this thing. That even when you got thing B, you're like, well, I really had my sights set on thing A. And so now it's hard to receive anything else. Our desires do this. Our desires have multiple different aspects to them that make desire such an incredible and also painful part of what it is to be alive and be human. Our desires are good, and they're born out of the uniqueness of who I am. I want things in part because I have particular gifts and talents and a unique personal makeup that lead me to want to find a certain match and an end to those things that are in myself. And at the same time, my desires can be bad and a painful force in my life. They can be fickle and unpredictable. They can motivate actions often that are out of control and cause great pain. And The Great Gatsby, which is a musical running on Broadway right now, is a musical that explores the incredible power and at times painful and destructive power of desire. The Great Gatsby is a new musical. It opened in April of 2024 on Broadway. It's playing at the Broadway Theater right now at like 53rd, 52nd and Broadway. Of course, The Great Gatsby also has a 2013 film adaptation starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Carey Mulligan, and both are obviously adaptations of the very famous F. Scott Fitzgerald book, The Great Gatsby, which was published in 1925. Even though when the book was published, it did not open to much critical acclaim over time, over the next couple decades, it came to be regarded as obviously the great American novel, both in the sense of its prose and its style, but in the story that it tells and the themes that it pulls out. And one of the major things that The Great Gatsby is about is it a story of overlapping desires and the chaos and destruction that they can cause when they are out of control. In the story, there's one man's desire for a woman that is in itself. There's a part of The Great Gatsby that's a love story, but wrapped up in that desire is also a larger desire for like upward class mobility and social mobility that is itself symbolic of the desires that make up American life and the American consciousness and the American dream. And in this story, the unhinged nature and the out-of-control passion through which people are pursuing these desires leads to the ruin and calamity of almost every major character in the story. And it asks these questions for us about our desires and how we handle them. What do we do with our desires? How do we get a grip on our desires? Are all of our desires bad, or are some of them good? Is there like a middle ground between these things? How can I make desire work for my good in my life? And is it possible to really, really want something and have it not end in ruin? Like, is it possible to want something really bad and even maybe in particular not get it, or not get it in the way that we thought we would, and have that story end in something other than ruin? Or if I want something really bad and I don't get it, is my life just ruined? Is that the only way that that story ends? Fortunately, the Bible has a significant amount of wisdom in it about desires. It says a number of things that we're going to look at today. First of all, not all our desires are bad. Some of them are good. We can learn how to control and relate to those bad desires such that they don't ruin our lives. And finally, the redemption of desire is part of God's plan to save the world. These are some of the things and themes we'll be looking at today. We're in a little mini sermon series in the month of October called God on Broadway, where we look for biblical themes that are present in shows that are currently on Broadway, so that you can engage with the scripture and go to the show, and you can engage with them and learn and think and reflect and see the ways that God is speaking to us in things that are just real life. Like, God's not just like here in church. Like, you can go out, oh, big surprise. You can go out to other places in the world and other things and be like, the same questions, the same things that I'm asking about my spiritual life, the same things that I'm asking about what makes a good life are the questions that people are asking everywhere. And so if the Bible doesn't just have like truth and authority in the church, it has truth and authority everywhere and good things to say everywhere. So you can engage here and go and see these shows and engage with them and see how they're being asked in culture. A couple weeks ago, we looked at Waiting for Godot. I hope some of you have maybe been able to see the show and reflect on some of the things that we looked at there about waiting and what it is to wait, and is waiting a livable life. And this week, we're looking at The Great Gatsby. I've titled today's sermon, Jesus and Jay Gatsby. We're going to be looking at James. James. We'll call him Jay for today. Jay chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. But we're actually not going to get there in this moment. If you want to flip your scripture open to James 1, 14 to 15, you can. We're going to come back to that. In this particular moment, we're going to do a little bit of work on understanding The Great Gatsby. There are many themes that are present in a work like this, especially like a master work of literature. We can't look at everything, but one major theme that is obviously present in The Great Gatsby is the theme of desire. And every single major character is run by some desire that they have. So just to name a few of them, there's Myrtle, there's Tom, there's Daisy. If you know the show or know the book, you're recognizing some of these names. Myrtle wants to be rich and have a rich husband. She wants to climb the social ladder. Tom is sort of like your like hyper toxic masculinity man. He like his glory days were like on the football field in college, and now he's always trying to get back to that. He's trying to relive the days when he conquered on the field, and so his whole life is about trying to reconquer other people. Daisy wants to have fun and be entertained and be glamorous and just not be bored. And of course, the major character that embodies desire is the titular character, Jay Gatsby, the Great Gatsby. On the surface, Jay Gatsby has everything, yet he is desire incarnate. He is the incarnation of desire. And in his story, which of course, over the course of the book, you learn different sort of narratives about him. He's kind of telling different half-truths in different places to sort of create a fictional version of himself. Jay Gatsby was born James Gatz. He's a lower-class Midwestern boy, but he's smart. He wants out of his social status, and so he joins the Army. And while he's in the Army, he goes to a debutante ball in Louisville, and he meets this girl, this young debutante named Daisy. And Daisy is the incarnation of everything that he wants. He's in love with her. She's beautiful, but she also represents a world that he does not belong to, that he wants to belong to. And so his desires are wrapped up in this person, and he begins to spend his whole life trying to accumulate money and wealth so that he can make himself someone that not just can have the hand of this woman, but can be welcomed into the world that she represents, this world of class and refinement and upward mobility and social standing. And so he buys, she lives. Of course, you know this already. The Great Gatsby famously takes place in New York. The two major locations are New York City and Long Island. And there's a little place in Long Island on the north shore of Long Island where the terrain juts out into these two little areas. They look like this. And in the book, they're called West Egg and East Egg. And I should have looked this up, but in reality, one of them is Great Neck, and the other one is a name that I cannot remember. But you could look at a map of Long Island and figure it out. But they're right across from each other. And so Daisy lives on the western edge of one of these little jutting out things. And Gatsby buys a house and builds a huge mansion right across that part of the bay from her. And at night, and this is the famous part of the book, you know this, you know the green light. Because Gatsby goes out on the dock, he goes out to the edge of the property that he has built, and he looks across the bay over and over again and sees the green light that's blinking at the end of Daisy's dock. And that green light symbolizes everything about what he wants and what he wishes, and it's right there. That's the whole thing. He's like, I can reach out and touch it. It's right there. It's right in my grasp. And that desire to just lay hold of it and have it finally all symbolized in this blinking green lights. This is one of the famous quotes about Gatsby's bodily presence in relationship to this light from the book. The text reads this. He says, "He stretched out his arm toward the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been the end of a dock." And this is this shaking. If I could just grab it and lay hold of it, all embodied by this symbol, the green light. This is everyone in the book, The Great Gatsby, reaching, trying to grab that thing. It's just out of my reach. And if I could just have it, and all these characters are just burning up. They're on fire with their desires of the life that is just barely outside of their grasp. And if that were all, like, that would be one thing. If the book were just like, hey, all these people have like really intense desires, be like, okay, that's one thing. But a second major theme that the book and the musical explores are the ways that our desires can become out of control and they become incredibly chaotic and destructive. And there's a major symbol in the story that embodies how our desires can become unhinged and destructive, and that symbol is cars. Again, maybe this is coming back to you. If you've seen the musical or if you read the book in like your high school literature class, right? You're like, oh yeah, now that there's a lot of car stuff in that book, and it's all bad. There's a lot of out of control car stuff in the book. There's car chaos all over the place. People are getting into wrecks. They're having to pull off on the side of the road. They're grabbing steers. The steering wheels are coming off the cars over and over. It's like there's no safe car in the book. And this is like a serious thing. And one of the themes that's brought out about this is that like being a bad driver of a car is about being a fundamentally careless person. Because cars are like these really powerful machines. And so if you're going to like move them, if you're going to drive them, you need to be someone who's in control of them, who's being responsible, who cares about other people. There's a key dialogue between two of the characters, Nick and Jordan, about what it is to be a bad driver, to be a careless person. This is how this dialogue goes. Nick says to Jordan, "You're a rotten driver," I protested. "Either you ought to be more careful or you oughtn't to drive at all." "I am careful." "No, you're not." "Well, other people are," she said lightly. "What's that got to do with it?" "They'll keep out of my way," she insisted. "It takes two to make an accident." Right? And this whole idea that like my desires are big, powerful things. And I need to drive them. They need to not drive me. And like to just be driving them around and hoping that I'm not going to create chaos by like putting all the responsibility on other people to stay out of my way is like being an irresponsible person behind the wheel of a very powerful automobile, right? And there's a key line here that really brings this metaphor home between the cars and desire. Nick, just after this, says this about himself. He says, "But I am slow thinking and full of interior rules that act on brakes to my desires," right? And we could actually wonder if Nick is, really behaving this way. Narrators, fundamentally, we trust them more than we should. You know this. You took literature classes, all these sorts of things. But this idea, right, where he brings into relationship the idea of brakes on my desires, right, is linking up really tightly the idea of like vehicular irresponsibility with like desirous irresponsibility. And that our desires, like we should drive them, but we need to pump the brakes on them sometimes, or at least need to know how to do that and when we need to be able to do that. When my desires are out of control and I'm not careful how I'm exercising them, it's like I'm being a negligent driver, and negligent drivers hurt themselves and other people. And of course, you know the story. This is brought all the way home in the story when Daisy and Jay, two of the characters who are the most desirous of the characters of the book, actually hit and kill somebody with their car. The verdict is really kind of written out for us in this story near the end of the book. This is what the author tells us about Gatsby's belief in the green light and how it functions for him and for us. This is what this quote says. It says, Gatsby believed in the green light. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run after, stretch out our arms farther. And one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Right, you see what he's doing here in this quote. The top part is talking about our psychology of how our desires, that we get back up every day thinking, I'm just gonna, if I could just do a little bit more and go a little bit harder and get that person out of the way, I just have it. And yet that whole way of thinking and living in relationship to my desires makes me constantly swimming upstream and living a life of struggle and ruin and chaos that comes from being driven by my desires instead of driving them myself. Is this inevitably what our desires will do to us? This is one of the questions of this story. Are we doomed to just wreak havoc in our lives and the lives of other people and the things that are around us because of the things that we didn't get? Are we all doomed to the struggle and pain of swimming upstream, of living a life where inevitably we will have some things that we want that simply don't come to pass in the way or the time that we wanted them to? Are we all just constantly doomed to reach out for something that we'll never grasp and to harm ourselves and other people along the way? And fortunately, the Bible has a lot to say about desire and how desire can work for our good, how we can get control of our desires, and the big plan that God has for desire writ large in the world and his purposes. And we're going to look at some of those things today by looking at James chapter 1, verses 14 to 15. I really do feel delighted that this has been plucked from the book of James. I didn't make the connection till now, but this feels just feels right that we're comparing James with James Gatsby. Let's look together at James 1, 14 to 15. This is what this text says. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. I want to look at three things today about desire. First, desire is good. Second, some desires are bad. And third, desire is redeemable. Let's look at the first thing here. Desire is good. I hope, this passage, you're like, where are you going to get desire is good from this passage? Because it seems like it says nothing about it. And in some ways that's true, but what we need to recognize is that there's an opposite side of the coin implicit in this passage. The Greek word here in James 1, 14 to 15 is epithumia. And not always, but frequently in the New Testament, this is a word used to talk about the sort of out-of-control passions/lust kind of desire. So epithumia, we might call epithumia desire in the sense that the ESV renders it here, but really what kind of desire we're talking about here is the sort of out-of-control passion or lust. There are other words in the Bible that mean desire that show up at different times. I'm not going to run through them with you. There are a number of them, but let's just look, for example, at Psalm 37, verse 4. This text reads this: "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Okay, so obviously the word desires here is functioning in a very different way than it's functioning in James chapter 1. The Hebrew word here is mishalah, and the Greek word is aitema. Here we're talking about desires in the sense of just my wants, my petitions, my requests. We could even say my wishes. But that's different from desire as out-of-control passions or lust. And the point that I want to make for you is that it is profoundly good news that the Bible has different words and different ways of speaking about desire, because that means that the Bible has nuanced and different things to say about desires. Most philosophies in the world and religions in the world have to engage with this challenging question of what do I do with my desires? That's just like present over and over again in different philosophies and religions. For the ancient Greeks, the Greek philosopher Plato, for example, talked a lot about this concept of pleonexia. It's actually a word that shows up twice in the New Testament, and it's talking about bad, unhinged desire. And Plato thought that generally all human desire ends up in pleonexia, unhinged greed. Like my desires are like this ravenous force that just kick off every limitation and boundary. They're never satisfied. It's pleonexia. And like, you can just imagine if that's the major concept that you have of desire, that desire in itself is basically this thing that can never be exhausted. You at the end of the day are gonna have to figure out a way to help people desire less. That's gonna be the solution. And of course, over time in Greek philosophy, there were philosophies that came up that said, really the way that you mature in your desire is by desiring less. You want less things. You get control of your desires and you kind of shove them down and you want less. Stoicism is one version of this. And so we take that word, you know the word stoic, right? People are stoic today. That comes from a Greek philosophy, ancient Greek philosophy called Stoicism that was doing a number of things in its philosophical articulations. But one of the things that it was doing was saying, hey, your life will be better if you wanted stuff less. If you just say, I have what I have, God gave it to me, and so I want less stuff, and so I'm not run by planexia. I'm not run by unhinged desire. Buddhism is a philosophy that does something very similar. Buddhism says that craving and attachment is the root of all our discomfort. And so the way that we get out of that is we want less stuff. We jettison ourselves of desire, and I empty myself of desire and craving. And there are things about that, of course, that are wise and in some sense true. But there's a big bummer that's like present in those religions and philosophies. You feel it now, just while you're thinking about it. You're like, I understand the logic of that, but it's not really good news to me because it feels like what it's saying to me is I just have to want less stuff. I have to want less for me. I have to hope less for me. I have to wish less for me. And the way that I get out of this pain and struggle from desire is by killing my desire, is by putting out the flame of my desire. And it's true. If the flame's out, nobody can get burned. And you can't get burned, and people around you can't get burned. And so there's a lot of wisdom in the world that would say something, that would accurately diagnose the problem, and then it would say the solution is for you to just not want much. And you and I, we just look at that and we know that something's not right with that. Because there are good wants and desires that I have. There are things that I want that are good. And there are passions that I have that I didn't choose. I woke up to them. I found them in here. And like to say no to those things, to put those out, feels like to put a part of myself to death that's like, not like the good die to yourself and you'll live kind of way, but like a die to yourself and you'll die kind of way. And we can feel that and something's just not quite right about that. And that is why it is so good that we're engaging with a book, the embodiments of a religion, of a worldview, of philosophy that says there's different things to be said about desire. And so we have different words for them and different understandings of them and different nuanced ways of talking about them because not all desire is bad. In fact, desire itself is a good thing. Desire is good. The experience of wanting something, of hoping for something, of wishing for something, of having a sense of a will that I want to come to pass is a good thing. Christianity teaches that desire is good. I know that some of you are like, well, I don't know what version of Christianity you've been hanging out with. The version that I experienced basically told me that my desires were bad. And we're about to get to the second point, wherein the truth of that is revealed. There are some desires that are bad, but basically the first thing that is to be said about desire is that desire is a good thing. And maybe you grew up in an environment, have been in a church environment, or just speak to yourself that like the solution to my problems is just to want stuff less. And I want to speak to you today, your desires are good. Your desires are good. They're part, the experience of desiring. That life opens up for me with purpose and passion and pursuit when I go, I want things, and I want things that are good. Yes, there's a conversation to be had about the training of desire, the discipline of desire, the aiming of desire. We're going to come back to all of that. But desire is a flame that you should keep lit in your life. Desire is a good thing. And in this passage today, I know that you're tired of hearing the word lust and all this sort of stuff. We have to keep saying these words because they accurately describe reality. But like I know that there's like a religious allergy and you're like listen, you need to understand the fact that we use the word lust to describe certain kinds of desires implicitly says, hey, there's other words we could use to describe desire that are about the good desire. Do you see what I'm saying? If we didn't have words that were dedicated to naming the bad kind, what it would mean implicitly is that all desire is bad. The fact that we're able to say that is not good desire, we call it lust. That is good news for you and me, because what it means implicitly is that there's good kinds of desire that we would not use the word lust to describe. Do you see what I'm saying? I understand the religious allergy, but we need to push past that a little bit, because underneath these things, on the other side of the coin of these things, are the things that are all the good things that God has in store for us. So we need to hear the things that we don't want to hear about. We need to hear the hard words. We need to hear the hard language so that I can go, oh, right, that's the stuff that's not good for me, but here's the other side, the things that are good for me. That word lust, I know it's challenging, all these sorts of things, but the other side of that is that there's things called wishes and wants and requests that are just good embodiments of things that I want and desire. Desire is good. Secondly, yes, we know this. You knew this would be part of the sermon. Some desires are bad. Some desires are bad. And in particular, desires that are out of control. Desires that are driving me instead of me driving them are desires that uniformly in the scriptures are described as bad, unhelpful, hurtful desires. Our passage today uses some interesting language at the beginning in James 1:14. It says, but each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desires. The ESV here renders that first word lured. I think if you look into it, it has a little bit of a more of an active sense. It could be rendered dragged away. I like that better. Let's pretend that the ESV rendered this, but each person is tempted when he is dragged away and enticed. Or lured. We could put lured. If you like lured, we'll put it in the second word. Dragged away and lured, right? It's got this wonderful thing where there's two things happening now with respect to my desires. On the one hand, my epithumias, my lusts, my out of control passions, they lure me. So they sort of have like this active thing that's going on where they're like, hey, over here, right? It's tempting, it's enticing, they're catching my eye. But not only that, at some point, once I walk towards them enough, they begin to drag me away. I really like this language because it shows I'm out of control. Right? There's a way that my desires can become to be almost like a second person in me, taking up residence, acting on me. I'm not an active participant anymore. I'm literally being dragged away by my desires. In terms of our English words, we would maybe use words like passions and lust to describe that. By passions, I don't mean your passion. I know passion's a good thing, passion. But like in a philosophical sense, passions in English has the sense of a desire that's out of control, like a raging fire in me that it can't be controlled. We might use words like wants and wishes and hopes and requests to talk about things that are not this negative kind of desire in the English. And in The Great Gatsby, one of the verdicts that's passed over the course of the book is that people who are just driven by these bad desires are fundamentally unserious, selfish, careless people who simply don't care who they hurt as they run around being driven by their out-of-control desires. Near the end of the book, this verdict is passed by the narrator on two of the characters. This is what he says. He says, they were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess that they had made. Our desires are incredibly powerful, and our bad desires are ones that are out of control, and those that are out of control are driving us, and we will probably begin to crash into people or things. And we'll hurt ourselves and other people when we're driven in this way. And this cycle, by the way, that's present in James 1:14-15, that I'm run by my lusts, then my lusts lead me to sin, and my sin leads me to death. If you know the story, it's kind of exactly played out in The Great Gatsby. Where are your desires driving you? Where are you simply not in control of the things that you wanted, and then the ways that you respond when you don't get what you want? Be honest, be humble for a second. Allow God to bring these things up in you. God's present with us now. The places that our minds are going to, that our hearts are going to, those soft witnessing voices, that area of your life that just popped up, it's probably God drawing something to your attention. Where are your desires driving you? Where are you not in control of what you want? And then the way that you respond is simply driven by your pain and frustration that I didn't get what I wanted. Listen, it is not okay to hurt other people when you don't get what you want. Let's be clear about that. It's never okay to do that, ever. I know there's a broader story of what happened and there's a true account to be given and all the parts that were played, all that is true. But it's not okay to hurt other people when we don't get what we want. Right now, I have a son, he's 2. He's going through a fascinating little phase where when he doesn't get what he wants and he's frustrated, he bites. And the interesting thing here is that he bites anything. I mean, it's wild to watch. We'll be like, no, you can't do that. And he'll just go over and find like the edge of a chair and just sink his teeth into the chair arm. He's just like, it's just in him. I have to do this. I've got to get this out. Maybe it's a physiological thing. It's a bodily thing. Maybe it's like I've got to hurt something. I don't know. Surely I was sinful in my mother's womb, right? All these things. But it's like, it's right there. And you know what? It's okay that he does that because he's 2. And it's not all right for us to do that anymore. It's not okay. At some point, I was reflecting on this. I don't know when or how this happened. Maybe it's because we don't understand ourselves in relationship to God. Like when you're a kid, you like want to grow up. You're like, I can't wait to be bigger. I can't wait to have more independence. I can't wait to have more responsibility. You're like, there's a tension there. Kids also do things where they're like, I like staying kids. I like being, but like when it's like, you're right. You can motivate kids to do things by going, well, a big boy and girl does this, blah, 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 right? You can do that. And then at some point we become adults and we don't want to grow anymore. At some point we grow up physically and mentally and then like, we're like, and I'm done doing that now. And now what I want to do is stay myself and stay let's just be honest, my chronically immature, selfish, self-serving self. And we lose the appetite for growing. The Bible says that you and I are little children. And it says that is the gospel, that it is incredible news that you and I are children of God. But that language of children doesn't just mean relationship. It means developmental stage. That there's a growing for me to do to become the full stature of maturity in Christ, God dwelling in me. If Christ would have become incarnate in me, what does that maturity and growth look like? And my hope for you in this moment is that the Holy Spirit is working in your heart to create for you the appetite for growth again. That just like when you were 3 and 4 and 5 and you did something because someone said this is what big boys and girls do, that you want that in your spiritual life. That you want to be like, I want to be like a spiritual big boy or girl. I want to grow. I want to have the fruits of wisdom show up in my life. I want to mature. I want to be all joy and no pouting. I want to be all desire and no just burning other people to the ground. I want the good things in life. I want to be the person that people come to for help and not the person that's chronically over and over again asking other people for. I want to be somebody who grows. I want to grow. I want to grow into the fullness of the maturity of who God has made me to be. Would God light that desire for you in your heart again today? That you would grow and mature. I have to say, this church is not a church that's going to coddle you in your immaturity. I know that is hard. I don't mean this isn't a graceless church. It's not what I mean. I don't mean this church is super intense. Like, just show up and show me how intense you are about being better. I don't care about that. But there's a difference between offering grace, which is like, there's almost nothing that you could do, unless you're like deeply deceptive about something. There's almost nothing that you could do that could get you kicked out here, that get you not welcome, get you removed, silence your voice. Like, this is a church that will offer real grace for whatever you're going through, whatever you bring to them, whatever mistakes you think. But there's a kind of thing that people, in my observation, are often looking for in churches where they go, I've got this one chronic area of immaturity. I'm constantly hurting myself and other people. And what grace is for me to be able to show up in church and do that to people over and over and over and over again. And we will not let you do that here. I'm sorry about that. This is a church of people who want to mature. Not that we can grow ourselves, but that God can grow us if we humbly and graciously make space for him to do that. And that we would actually want these areas in my life where I am shedding some skin that fit me back there but doesn't fit me anymore, where I'm looking around at other people in the eyes going, I want to grow with other people in that way. This is a place for people who want to mature, who want to grow. And I would just warmly invite you into a gracious environment where we are all going to look at one another and go, we want to mature. We're clear about what we're doing here. We're growing together. We are together letting God grow us up. Your desires are good. Some of your desires are bad. Finally, our desires are redeemable. Our desires don't need to go away. The solution to desire in Christianity isn't that I just desire less. Isn't that I put out the flame of my desire and then become this stone-faced, passionless, don't want anything kind of a person. Just this emotional flatlining to get through the pains and disappointments of life. We need to be on fire with desire, but we need those desires to come into alignment with God's own desires. Because God, the God of the Bible, is a God who desires things, who wants things, who has, this is wild to say, but it's how God has set things up now. We could even say hopes, wants, a will that he's allowed to be contested now, but that he wants to come to pass because it is good. Look at when Jesus teaches people how to pray. When he teaches people how to pray, look at the first thing that he says in Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 to 10. He says this, pray then like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The first thing, after he says, address God and tell him that he's holy. After that, the first thing that you should pray is that your desires would line up with God's desires. That's a wild thing to say. It's a wild thing to say. I mean, just looking really clearly at this, right? The parallel here, your kingdom come, your will be done, right? So God's kingdom, the place of God's rule, equals the place where God's will is coming to pass. In other words, to talk about God's kingdom, to talk about things being run according to the heavenly reality and kingdom of God, is to talk about desire. It's a place where God's desires are coming to pass all the time. And the first thing that Jesus says when we are praying in relation to God is that we should pray, God, would your desires come to pass here? And as I pray for that, I'm bringing my desire to the table. Being a kingdom person, wanting God's kingdom to come, wanting the way that things work here to come under the authority of God is a matter of desire. The kingdom is a matter of desire. In order for God's kingdom, for his rule to be, we don't need people who are dying to their desire. We need people who have more desire and are bringing that desire into alignment and into the service of the God of the Bible. It's a place of desire. And Jesus was the kingdom. He was all desire for the will and the desires of God. Let's just look at one quick passage. There are many places in the Gospels that we could go to see this part of who Jesus is. Let's just look at John 4:34. This is what this passage reads. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and accomplish his work. My food is to do God's will. I mean, Jesus is so desirous. He wants I don't know what picture of Jesus you have in your mind. He's wandering around. He's got his eyes closed. He's super peaceful. He's barely touching the ground, and you're just what? He's just floating through earth. Jesus is I am hungry for God's desires that they might come to pass in this world and this time. This is a passionate person who's saying, I would rather do the will of God than eat. It's more nourishing to me. I want it that badly. I mean, you know what it's like. You know what it's like to want something and to be able to dabble in that thing for a second and to be do you have something that you actually like doing so much that you forget to eat as you're doing it? I mean, like for me, like reading, there are certain things when I'm reading and studying, when I go and go, hours will go by and I will forget my appetite. I'll be unaware of it. That's what it looks like for like my hunger to be replaced by the expression of a desire. Jesus is saying, my hunger is replaced. My physical hunger is always replaced by my desire. I forget that I'm hungry. I forget it. This is all coming to me now. There are passages in the Bible where Jesus is forgetting to eat. You know this? The Samaritan woman, the disciples are like, you need to eat lunch. Jesus is like, I'm already filled up. I'm filled up. This is my food. I'm so desirous of it, I'm forgetting that I'm hungry. Jesus is fed by the desire to do God's desires, and this is where I think there's just such a delightful parallel between Jesus and Jay Gatsby, because they both are desire incarnate. Jay Gatsby is maybe the incarnation of American desires, needing this person, needing this lust to be satisfied, needing this place, needing this money, needing this thing, needing this mobility, needing this status, needing to be viewed in a certain way in the eyes of the world. And Jesus is the incarnation of kingdom desire. God's will, God's desires, God's place, God's movement, God's currency, God's view, God's perspective. And for Gatsby, his desires, he just can never quite lay hold of them. And yet Jesus testified that he did lay hold of his desires. And let's be clear, Gatsby's desires led him to death, and Jesus' desires led him to life. Jesus' desires are so good for him. They're so burning, they're so the right kind of light and the right kind of fire that they brought him back up from out of the ground. Jesus desired with a kind of desire that led to life, not a kind of desire that led to death. And this is what you and I need. We need to burn up with desire for God. Desire is a fire. And the problem with fires is that they are consuming. They eat things. And they need to be fueled with stuff because they eat, because they consume. And so you have some desires that are burning in your life that are eating stuff up. And we see this, don't we, all over the world. I mean, honestly, in this world, if you want something bad enough, you probably can find a way to get it. It will just come at a terrible cost. And that's what we see all over the place. And you can think, well, who are the people that you admire? The people that you admire is the wrong word, idolize. They got the thing that I wanted. What's the state of their life writ large? What's the cost of having that thing? Is it their health, their physical health? Is it their mental health? Is it their financial health and well-being? Is it their relational health? Did they have to sacrifice their work? What did they have to do? Because this is how fires work. They burn and they eat stuff. And what you and I need is to be set on fire by a fire that burns without consuming. And we know that this is the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible burns without consuming. And every desire that we have is a sign and a signpost to the desire and the longing that you and I have for God. God himself and God in everything. God in my desires for relationship, God in my desires for work, God in my desires for financial stability, God in my desires to become something and to do something that matters, God in all of these things. And when I want God in that thing, my desire gets bigger and the consumption gets lower. That's what you and I need, to have more desire, but to be set on fire with a desire that isn't taking from us at the same time, but that gives and burns with a bigger and bigger light without consuming. Jesus burned with desire for God, and it gave him everything back. It didn't take anything from him. It gave him life. And Jesus believed that God's kingdom, the fulfillment of all of his desires would come, and that it would come as a green and growing world. And we know that this will come to pass. What kind of fire is lighting you in your desire? Are your desires giving life to you, or are they taking from you? In your actions, when you don't get what you want, Are you witnessing to the fact that my desire is consuming me and other people around me? My desire is driving me. I'm not driving my desire, so I'm crashing myself and other people and harming other people and justifying it over and over again because I didn't get what I want and I'm so hurt and I'm pouting by all these things. Or is my desire something that is burning with an even greater light and greater flame, and yet it's not consuming me and other people around me? In fact, it's giving life to me and other people around me. Our desires can be changed from those that are driving us into those that we are driving. Not just that we are driving, but those that align with the desires of God. They can be changed into that. So the only real question here is, what do you want to want? What do you desire to desire? You can ask God in that place, that deeper place, to change my desires such that I would want the things of God and its fruit and its life in me and in my life. I like the New Living Translation of Philippians 2:13. It reads this. It says, "For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what he pleases." God is able, when we welcome him in, to change and set on fire our desires with a flame that burns without consuming, if you and I would ask him to. Would you ask God to give you the desire to do what he wants for you, to want what he wants for you? To want these things is to want and desire the kingdom of God. To long for my life to be one shred of creation in the world where this place, this part of creation that's called me, lines up with the will of God. That it's being done in me, the will of God. And that as that happens, my own experience of desire is bigger and coming alive. People in the world are looking for people to follow who are on fire with desire. I mean, that's just something people are looking for. They want to see people burning up with desire. And so you and I should burn up with desire. We just should, if we're doing that in a way that is set on God's desires and asking God to align my desire with his and wanting to desire the things that God desires and trusting that that is going to work out in a way for me that corresponds to who God made me to be. As we do that, we should be people that other people look around and go, they are burning up with desire. And yet somehow their life is getting bigger. Somehow that's giving to their life instead of taking from it. Somehow it helps them be better at relationships with other people instead of worse. Somehow it helps them love their work even more and in the right way without being a slave to their work at the same time. Because if you are on fire, like, you will shed a light. People will look at it and they will want the life that you have. And my goodness, it would be good for them to see one person who's burning and yet the rest of their life is not consumed as the cost. What do you want? And what do you want to want? We should want God's kingdom. We should want God's kingdom in this place and in our own lives, the place where God's will and the actuality of what is happening overlap. And we should want eternal life to be on display now in our lives as a fire that burns, but that doesn't consume. Desires that give life instead of taking it. And people who become more alive through their desires and not less. Our desire can become a way of living regardless of what we do and don't get in any particular situation that is a source of strength and life to me. And we know and trust that God is the satisfaction of our desires. Now, all the desires that we have in him will have a good and satisfying end. Amen.